Welcome viewers to part 2 of my take, Toni Aubynn's take. Last week we had a very interesting discussion on the extractive industries. We had Mr. David Noko, who flew all the way from South Africa, Anglo Gold Ashanti, the global executive director in charge of sustainability, coming here to help us discuss that, along with Mr. Jerry Ahaji, who is the principal officer for policy planning, who also was here to support our discussions. Today, we'll look at part 2 of our discussions. That is our extractive industries, how far we have come. With me to discuss this, I will introduce my guest later on after this short break. Welcome back, viewers. This is Toni Aubynn's take. And as I told you, I have some brilliant people here to help me discuss this. On my extreme left, which is to your extreme right, is Mr. Suleiman Kone, who is the Chief Executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines. And close to him, and in fact on my immediate left, is Dr. Steve Mantiao. Dr. Steve Mantiao wears many hats, and he would want me to introduce him only as a campaign coordinator for ISODEC. But I know he plays a very active role in the extractive industries transparency initiatives. Welcome back, gentlemen.
Thank you.
And I am Toni Aubynn. I am the Chief Executive of the Minerals Commission. I used to be the Chief Executive of the Chamber of Mines, and prior to that, also had a stint with tallow oil. And then even before then, I spent close to 10 years with Goldfields Ghana as the head of corporate affairs. So you would agree with me that I've had some time with the extractive industries. So I believe we're going to have a very interesting discussion today. Now let me go straight to the point with the Chief Executive of the Ghana Chamber of Mines, Mr. Kone. How are we doing, especially as far as the industry is concerned?
Thank you very much, Tony. The industry is going through a very difficult period. As you well know, most of the minerals we produce in this country, about 95% of the value is gold. And therefore, anything which affects gold naturally affects the entire industry. And in the last 2 years or so, we've seen the price of gold actually take a hit, about 30% to 40% decline in the price of gold. And that naturally has affected the mining industry. The mining companies have not just thrown their hands in the air complaining. What they've tried to do is to try and manage the situation. So what they have essentially done is to redesign their mining processes such that they're able to survive the storm which has actually hit them in the last few years. And I believe that they are doing pretty well relative to what most people expected, that there would be some casualties in terms of closures of mines and so on and so forth. So I think on that score, I think they have managed pretty well, but it's quite tough.
But isn't it the case that anytime we talk about the mining industry, we're talking about gold? Is it also not because we are in a trap now that when gold doesn't behave well, gold price doesn't behave well, we are all in a serious seas?
And that's a major concern for us, Tony. We have a situation where, like I said, about 95 to 96% of our mineral revenue comes from gold. And it's a major worry because, as we all know, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. And that is what we have seemingly done over the years. Ghana is blessed with so many minerals, and it's about time we actually tried so hard to diversify our mineral production base. Yes, we have some bauxite, we do some mineral, manganese as well, but these are quite small. If you consider the mineral endowments, I think we should seriously consider going to the other minerals which God has so kindly blessed us with.
I couldn't agree more with you because if you look at our seas, I think we are within the West Africa sub-region. I think it's Ghana and Senegal that has the prospect of producing solar salt, and that's really black gold which is sitting untapped, and everybody is looking at the yellow gold. I know we have a lot of clay. In fact, there's no part in Ghana that doesn't have clay, and the uses of clay it's enormous. You can talk about the possibility of manufacturing ceramics, textiles and other things in this country, which we import from China and Italy and other places. So you're right, I think it's about time we look at the so-called non-traditional minerals. But Steve, let me come back to you. If you look at the statistics, the mining industry will tell you that we contribute 28% of the internal revenue. We contribute about 45%, or sometimes between 30 and 45% of foreign exchange. We employ this, we employ that. Effectively, statistically, one would say that mining is making significant contribution to the economy. But if you went on the street, and I have done that myself before, and asked people if they were benefiting from mining, they would just tell you stories that are quite different. Most of them, you will get 90% who will say, we are not getting anything from mining. In fact, some may go to that extreme. Are we not getting anything from mining?
Thank you very much. I don't think it would be entirely right to say we are not getting anything from mining. Because at least there are certain benefits that we can see, anybody at all can see. Employment, for instance. The corporate social responsibility expenditures in the communities are there to be seen. But I think that a lot of the times the full story is not told. Because when we are thrown with statistics and such as revenue generation in the sector, employment figures and stuff like that, what we are not often told is how much it's cost us as a nation to generate these revenues and these jobs. Because before you create new jobs, a lot of times you destroy existing jobs, existing livelihoods, farming, hunting, and the chobas that depend on the hunting, all that, are usually destroyed to make way for mining. And in the process of mining, yes, you create new jobs, but we should be talking about net job creation. That is, you take the jobs that you have destroyed out of the new ones you've created to determine whether or not we have actually made a gain or a loss in making way for mining the way we have. Again, I think that there's a big whole policy issue. As a nation, I think when we discovered gold and decided to mine gold on commercial scale, we should have actually first thought about the policy. As it is now, we do have a minerals and mining law before contemplating a minerals and mining policy. So we haven't really thought through how we are going to integrate the industry into the rest of the national economy, such that over the years we've ended up creating an enclave out of our mining industry. Perhaps if we had a policy that sought to integrate mining into the rest of the economy, this country would have taken its royalty in kind and not in cash. Today we take royalty, 3% royalty in cash.
I think it's 5%.
It's now 5%, yes, but some are still paying 3%. I mean, the Anglo-Gold Ashantis and the Newmont of this world are still paying 3%.
That's so true.
And so the point I'm making is that if we took our royalty in kind, that's gold, and fed this raw material gold into domestic jewelry making, we'll be first and foremost adding value to our gold exports. But then we'll also be creating jobs for our people. And as we create jobs for our people, we'll be creating new tax opportunities to finance our national development. These we haven't done through policy. And I think that is the reason people are not feeling the impact of the mining industry on their lives.
Viewers, you are watching My Take, Toni Aubynn's Take. And as I told you, I'm here with some powerful experts here. We have Mr. Suleiman Ikone of the Ghana Chamber of Mines, he's the CEO, and then Dr. Steve Mantiao, who wants to be identified as the campaign coordinator of ISODEC, and he does a lot of other things, particularly with mining. Now, I think that in the issue of linking mining to the economy, I'm sure those who feel that they are not benefiting from mining may be right, because if we have a situation where you produce from a remote zone and you export it directly, the integration of the activity into the breadth of the economy is not there, will be missing. And that's absolutely right. And I believe that is why we haven't seen mining making very visible impact on us. If you go to other countries, I'm sure Australia, Canada, even South Africa, most of the requirement for mining is actually obtained from there. most of the inputs.
Yeah.
And I'm aware that on the average about $500 million are spent on input to mining. How do you think we can capture part of these $500 million on the average for a mine, if they were going to go on the average? How are we able to capture that? Because if we were getting the 500 million staying here, staying in the country, I'm sure the dynamics will be different. What do you think can be done in that sense?
Well, I think we do, as a country, have recognized that opportunity, which I believe is what informed the decision.
And I must say that the figure that I know is that on the average, the companies spend about 200 million on these items. And it's not because they don't want to buy from here, but it's because the items are either non-existent or they are not in the quality that is required, or the supply is not as reliable as you would want to think.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think, like I was saying, we have recognized that opportunity, and that is, for me, in my view, what informed the decision of government to develop local content regulations for the industry. I think even prior to that, the chamber itself had taken some steps to kind of proactively create opportunities for Ghanaian enterprises to see some of these opportunities. But you see, in my view, it is just not enough to have regulations or for the chamber to take proactive steps to create those opportunities. When the opportunities are created, there should be people ready with the requisite capacity and wherewithal to be able to seize those opportunities. And often, capacity or local content opportunities are created without the capacity building that must go along with it. First and foremost is the training. Training in terms of equipping people with the capacity to be able to deliver to standards. We are very poor at meeting standards here in this country. And so I think that people have to be introduced to what I would describe, or is commonly described as the industry standards, and be trained according to that so that they'll be able to deliver to those. Two, there's also the need for technical capacity training in terms of our technical and vocational training institutions being part of the processes of developing the local content, and therefore being provided the resources to be able to provide the appropriate training for Ghanaian enterprises who are seeking opportunities in the industry. So yes, developing regulations is good, but then there are other things that we need to do. There's also the financing bit that a lot of the times also constitute constraints in the way of people seizing opportunities in the industry. And so you may want to think about a venture capital fund. After acquiring the training and being able to deliver to standards, you need a capital. And so people can go and borrow money from these venture capital funds at subsidized rates so they can be able to seize these opportunities. I think you do that as part of a mentoring and nurturing process for a period, then you can withdraw all these state support from those enterprises that are working in the industry. I think that is what we haven't thought through, and it's all a policy issue that we need to revisit.
Sule, in 2011, your organization went into partnership with my organization, the Minerals Commission, and IFC to sort of advance local supply chain development. Where are we on that?
Yes, thank you very much. But even before I come to that, I think this is a pet project I'm quite passionate about, which has to do with integration of the rest of the economy, particularly manufacturing industry, into how it is actually linked to the mining industry. It's so critical that as a country we have always said that the structure of our economy has not changed. And it's lamentable that even as we complain, we have not been able to rise up to the occasion to say enough of the talk. We need to take action so that in the next few years we should be able to see a kind of transformation. And I believe strongly that, as Steve has said, on the back of the mining industry and other strategic industries in this country, we should be able to diversify our economy. Yes, the Chamber of Mines has taken some proactive initiatives. The good thing I would want to share with our viewers is that we'll be able to identify strategic areas which we believe that as a country we have a competitive advantage to produce. And therefore we are trying to look out for information. In the last few days we were able to get information from the Ghana Revenue Authority, more the Customs Division of the Ghana Revenue Authority, for example, as to how much, for example, of caustic soda we bring into the country. Because we believe caustic soda, for example, is a strategic input, which on the basis of what we know, we should be able to produce in this country. The mining industry consumes a lot of it, but we believe that if you should put everything together, all the consumption within country, we should be able to incentivize an entrepreneur to start up a plant to start looking for.
I mean, I totally agree with you on this issue of caustic soda. I mean, in a country that has seen mining for a long time, I always say that we import activated carbons. The activated carbons are manufactured out of coconut, the core of coconut, and then the palm kernel. And so really, there are areas that we could be going into and making sure that these things are kept within the economy. Is it the case that the entrepreneurs are not adventurous enough, or it is rather policy that has not been dynamic enough to push people to doing that?
I think it's both.
Yeah.
I think that if you look at the minerals and mining law, and then, for example, the LI 2173, which regulates local content, you don't see any specific rule, so to speak, for example, for the Ministry of Trade and Industry. And therefore, although we have regulation which, for all intents and purposes, is about the best you can find, probably in the sub-region, that linkage between even the mining sector and trade and industry is missing. And that bridge has to be, that gap has to be bridged as quickly as possible, so that at least at the policy level, we are able to realize the objectives for which these legislations are actually implemented. Again, the question of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is about taking reasonable risk. And unfortunately for us in our country, I think the general environment does not really, incentivize people or entrepreneurs to go into manufacturing. If you consider, I'll give you one example, and we just discussed it this morning. If you consider the tariff for manufacturing in this country, it's much, much higher than you would find within the sub-region. In fact, it is so inverted that residential customers actually pay much, much lower than manufacturing. And why should it be? So even from the get-go, industry...
Oh, you mean electricity tariffs?
Electricity, exactly.
Okay.
Even from the get-go, industry is challenged. Not to talk about other pieces of infrastructure, for example, the challenges at the ports, road, rail, and so on and so forth. So for me, I call it the hygiene factors for manufacturing. If you are not able to resolve the hygiene factors of manufacturing, you can talk and shout about local content and integration, it will not happen. And therefore, the issue of policy is important for us to optimize the benefits of the mining industry. One, we should make sure that we have a linkage at the highest policy level between the Ministry of Trade and then the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources. Entrepreneurship, again, has to do with the willingness of the entrepreneur to take that risk. And if from the very beginning he's disadvantaged, then naturally he will not go into manufacturing. He will rather go into areas which will give him quick returns, lower risk, and so on and so forth. So Steve is right. How do we ensure that issues of capital are actually addressed? Because these are larger issues we need to look at if we really want to optimize the benefits of the mining industry through integration. Again, you talked about the IFC and Chamber of Mines and the Minerals Commission, relationship. I think it went pretty well up to a point where we did lots of studies. We were able to identify products which actually informed
28 items.
28 items, and it was whittled down, and eventually we came to about 8 items which were recognized by the Minerals Commission under the local procurement legislation, which we are working with now. Now, the key question is that how do we expand the scope to go into the 28 items we are talking about? And we have re-established relationship with the IFC to ensure that we're able to come up with a local supplier development program such that we're able to identify entrepreneurs who are willing, who have the competence and capability to actually train them, give them the capacity to be able to produce some of these inputs for the mining industry.
Well, we'll take a break very soon. But when we come back, we'll be looking at what decisions have to be taken, what hard decisions have to be taken, what actions do we have to take to ensure that we integrate mining into the economy of this country, particularly focusing on local content. I think it's absolutely key. But we'll take a break. When we come back, I'll throw back the question to you. Viewers, you're watching my take, you're watching Toni Aubynn's take. Toni Aubynn is the CEO of the Minerals Commission. He used to work as the CEO of the Ghana Chamber of Mines and also worked not as a CEO this time, but as a Director of Corporate Affairs at Talo Oil, and then Director of Corporate Affairs and Social Development at Goldfields Ghana. Obviously, Toni Aubynn has had some time with the mining industry. No, the extractive industry, I must say. So, and with me to discuss this subject, as you know, we have Mr. Suleimani Kone, who has also spent over 20 years in the extractive industry, having worked with Shell before, and then over 16 years with the Ghana Chamber of Mines. And Steve Mantia, who has spent almost all his life reviewing policies on mining. He's been working on policies and advocacy on mining. We take a break. Welcome back, viewers, to My Take. You're watching Toni Aubynn's Take. Now, before we went on break, I was talking about what difficult decisions, what sacrifices must we make as a country to ensure that, you know, mining becomes actually beneficial through integration to all of us. Let me start from you, Sule.
I think the first thing we have to do, which I believe the Minerals Commission has already started, has to do with enforcement of the regulations, LI 2173, to ensure that even when the Minerals Commission says that this is the procurement list under the legislation, companies actually comply. So it's more about enforcement. Again, it's about identifying, again, the companies who have the competence to produce these items and helping them and supporting them all the way. And the companies also have a responsibility, which happens in other jurisdictions, to really mentor and support these companies. I know in the past the companies have done so well. With a typical example, grinding media with the Temasteel. Initially, when they were producing the grinding media, for example, for the mining company, it was not up to scratch. The quality was not too good. But yet we were able to help this company, you know, to improve and enhance its capacity. Now is a major supplier, you know, to the mining industry. So there's an example. There is a typical example which I've actually alluded to, and there is no reason why we cannot replicate this for other, you know, identified inputs which we believe we have a competitive advantage to produce.
Steve, before you come up with your own sort of side of the thinking, you keep hearing that some of the mining companies are very repulsive when Ghanaian suppliers go, in a way, try to play games, and they have their pet suppliers, and they wouldn't want to change. Some of these vendors, they complain that they have businesses to do with company A, but they look at my face and they are looking at doing things with others who are non-Ghanaians. Is this something that you have heard about?
Yeah, it's something that has come to my attention. I think I've even had a occasion to raise a particular issue with Sule at the chamber. It has to do with Holman Petroleum, and it's
maybe if you don't
mention
names. If you don't.
Well, okay, right.
Transparency, is it?
Yeah. I just want to be open because I think I raised the issue quite openly,
right.
And it had to do with a certain complaint of unfair treatment by a major mining company in this country when it sought to provide fuel supplies on contract basis to that company. So there are those things that have come to attention. But that was before the local content.
I also even within the period of local content, also we receive a lot of complaints that big companies who are dealing with them would eventually change because there is a foreign company that has come and has sort of metamorphosed into a local company and all that. We subject these things to investigations before we act. But just thought from your advocacy point, you may be receiving even more.
So it raises a whole question about compliance and how we monitor and enforce it. I don't think enforcement is always the way to go. Sometimes you can incentivize and by providing some concessions, be it in form of taxation and all that, to companies. That if you can maybe do X percentage, this is what you get in return. So it's a carrot and stick approach that we need to. But the most important thing is to put in place a compliance monitoring regime that enables us to identify some of these infractions and address them when they happen, but also to encourage the companies, those who are doing well. So for instance, it doesn't hurt for on annual basis to identify companies that are doing very well in terms of compliance with local content and to shame those you think are not doing too well. So those, for me, will be very critical in making progress with our local content provisions. But there's also the other issue that I think is also equally important. Who are the local content regulations targeting? And what have we done proactively to bring to their attention the opportunities created by those regulations? I don't think we have done enough outreach. For instance, with the AGI and other entrepreneurial bodies in terms of what opportunities exist in the industry and how they can take advantage of them.
Yeah, I agree. So, because if you look at, I mean, Sule made a point earlier that if you look at LI 2173 and other policies around it, you do not see any link between the industry and the mining industry and the Ministry of Trade and Industries. Really, local content is for the Ministry of Trade and Industries. So that link should be there.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And then it will require a lot of outreach out there to reorient Ghanaian entrepreneurs with the resources who are currently more interested in buying and selling to begin to look at these opportunities. And if they see that indeed the sector is rewarding, they will definitely put their monies in there. And there's a lot of work there to do. Conscientization is quite key in this direction.
But I also admit that over the last maybe 5 years, we've seen an upsurge of Ghanaian involvement in the supply chain of mining. I mean, when I was at the chamber, we kept seeing figures going up. Yeah. The amount spent on Ghanaian suppliers, not necessarily Ghanaian manufacturers, but Ghanaian suppliers. I think at the time I was leaving, some whooping $2 billion had been spent on local purchases, which was quite encouraging. I was just wondering how we could continue to do that as an industry.
I think
from your point.
I think it's something we need. We don't have a choice in this environment where the mining industry is always challenged to show its worth and its value to the country. The mining industry has no choice than to comply with the local content regulations. It is for us to show champions we have actually created that these are Ghanaian entrepreneurs we have been able to develop, and on that basis, even been able to help to move outside the shores of this country. We'll be able to cultivate them from the very basics to the point where they have even gone onto the international stage. So it's something we need to dip in, and in this we really have to work together with the Minerals Commission. It's also important. We don't have a choice in this endeavor. The chamber itself recently, based upon some concerns, it's not very different from what we have actually described here, decided to develop some guidelines to govern the relationship. It's interesting because I just had a meeting this morning with the supply managers group of the chamber to govern the commercial relationship between the mining companies and the local supplier. So it's something which the chamber itself is taking very, very seriously. Again, there's this issue about what to do, or preferential treatment, so to speak, for Ghanaian entrepreneurs when it comes to tenders. And there again, if you look at the LI makes explicit provision for it to say is that when it comes to tenders, there's always a margin of preference. There is a margin of preference of about 2% where you can exhibit or show that the Ghanaian content in terms of ownership, employment, and management is higher than the other competing,
but that's very interesting, because for me, I think the very definition of local content is also missing a little bit, and the objective of it, because you will need to be very clear what you mean by local content.
Exactly.
Is it Ghanaian content? Is it Ghana-made content? Is it local in terms of, in the case of my village, Daman content, because we want people, sort of producing and manufacturing from the local area. And again, why are we doing this? Is it to create jobs for Ghanaians? Is it to expand the manufacturing base? Or is it to actually reduce the balance of payment deficit? Because one could look at local content from the point of view of import substitution. What's your view of why we're doing this? It may sound so fundamental, but in some areas they are quite clear. We want to reduce imports. So it's an import substitution thing, regardless of who does it. If it is, the manufacturing is done in country, it is local content enough.
I think for me, it's a combination of all three that you have actually, highlighted. Yes, we want to ensure that we deepen local manufacturing because there are benefits for us. Our brothers and sisters will get jobs to do, and it's not jobs because jobs go with value. The person has a job, he has good self-worth, is able to provide for his family, an extended family, and so on and so forth. Yes, if you're able to do import substitution, naturally it benefits the whole economy. Tony, if you consider the legislation, I always want to go back to the legislation because I have gone through it and it hits me sometimes the kind of words which I use. It doesn't refer to local content. Yeah. It's more Ghanaian content. Okay. That's how I say it. And therefore, to talk about more the proportion of Ghanaian content, like I said, in terms of ownership, employment, and management. So the whole idea is to ensure that we have, even if it's a foreign company, which is registered in this country, I think the whole idea is that it is based in this country and it's offering value to this country rather than importing from outside the country.
That's where the issue issue of balance of payment comes in.
Yeah. Exactly, you're right. So when you're looking exclusively at the balance of payment issue, then in that case you don't even care who comes to produce here. And it just comes to produce and it saves you money going out there, and therefore that provides value for you. But in my mind, your very best is to ensure that you have a Ghanaian doing the local manufacturing here, Ghanaian in terms of ownership, Ghanaian in terms of the capital, Ghanaian in terms of the people they employ, even Ghanaian in terms of the management of the company. That is the surest way to go. That is a kind of spectrum, and this will be the end of the spectrum.
But Steve, isn't this a dream?
Well, I don't think it's a dream.
Ghanaian capital, Ghanaian entrepreneur, Ghanaian everything without partnership. I mean, dreams are not bad, because actually you have to dream to live it. So if we could live it, that's fine. But in your view, is it attainable?
No, I don't think it's looking at 100% Ghanaian ownership. No, okay. I think it's a dominant Ghanaian ownership. So some introduction of some foreign capital wouldn't be out of way. But I think, in my view, all the objectives that Sule talked about in terms of the local content are attainable. Yeah. But for me, the most important objective, which I think hasn't been touched on, has to do with preparing Ghanaians, especially people from the host communities, for life after mining. Because skills that people acquire in delivering local content are transferable to other sectors of the national economy. Right. So for instance, if you're providing catering services or security services, and you've done that for a mining company for years, when the mine comes to a closure, you can transfer those same skills to the construction industry and to the other sectors of the economy. So it prepares us to ensure a very sustainable economic life after mining, and which for me is paramount in this discussion, because one of the worst years of most natural resource dependent economies has been life after the resource has been exhausted.
And, I mean, I said it on the previous show that our natural resource extraction is not renewable. It is not only ours. When you're extracting a natural resource, I mean, natural resources such as gold, diamond, manganese is finite. You take it and it doesn't grow again. So I think it's important to always ensure that life continues even beyond mining. Viewers, you're watching The Take, Toni Aubynn's take. It's my take. And I have great people to discuss this. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about another aspect of local content, which is small-scale mining, because that is one of the biggest local content that we are not looking at very carefully. We take a break from here. Welcome back, viewers. You're watching Toni Aubynn's Take. We have been discussing in the last 2 weeks Ghana's extractive industries and how far we have fared. Today, we have focused more on local content and how to integrate the mining industry into the economy. I've been helped in this discussion by Mr. Suleiman Okone of the Ghana Chamber of Mines, he's the CEO, and Mr. Dr. Steve Mantiao, who is a campaign manager or the head of campaigns for ISODEC. He coordinates all their campaigns and does many other things as well. Welcome back. Now, Sule, let me come back to you. Small-scale mining, according to the laws, the Minerals and Mining Law, or Minerals and Mining Act 2006, Act 703, it is quite clear that small-scale mining is a real definition of local content, because it says that small-scale mining is preserved for Ghanaians. It looks as if Ghanaians don't want it, because they would rather go out there and bring other people to come and do it for them. Is that what you observe from where you?
You are right in saying that it's an apt description of local content, because it's the exclusive preserve of Ghanaians. Ghanaians who are 18 years and above are entitled to get licenses if they so desire to engage in small-scale mining. But your observation is so spot on that we find a situation where Ghanaians tend to invite foreigners to come and help them to do small-scale mining, which is actually an affront to the law. And from our understanding, based upon our experience in the industry, it looks like we need to give capacity. There's lack of capacity from the perspective of indigenous Ghanaians who want to go into small-scale mining, in terms of the funding requirements, in terms of the technology requirements. But there are areas where I believe that as a country we should be able to help small-scale miners, because for me, making it a preserve of Ghanaians and leaving it like that in the law without the support mechanisms for them to do their work is a major challenge we have as a country. I asked myself the question, if indeed we say that mining itself is a relatively hazardous venture, and therefore for large-scale mining companies, the regulator would insist that not just any Ghanaian or any entrepreneur would be allowed to go into that venture, even if you have all the resources to do it. Why don't you also ensure that, for example, you have people who are competent to be able to get the license to do their work? Because if you look at the large-scale mining segment of the business, there are strict, compliance issues there. You have to make sure that not just the capital and competence to show that you can do it, but you should make sure that you have people who have been trained, who are certified and proficient to do the work. On the other hand, when it comes to small-scale mining, I don't think that we have clear guidelines and regulations to ensure that this happens. The issue of funding is so paramount, because you see, some study we did years ago, and Tony, we were part of the study, showed that most people you find in the pits who are exposed to all the dangers of illegal mining are just pawns. And the baron, so to speak, sits in the big capitals, regional capitals in the country.
I have been quoted as saying that Ghanaians must examine themselves. We should really, when we talk about illegal mining, for example, as soon as you open your mouth talking about this activity, find out whether you are not complicitly part of the problem.
That's the issue.
Because you may have someone who may be preaching and saying that, oh, illegal mining, or these activities must be allowed to go on because there are people who are aching out a living. There are those who have bought excavators for people to work with, and they are residents outside the activity area. There are those who are refusing to check the implementation of the law. There are those who either knowingly or unknowingly giving out lands for small-scale mining to be done, even though the law is quite explicit about who gives out the lands. So I think we should look at the various linkages and the complicities that surround this whole activity of illegal mining. I don't want to spend so much time on illegal mining, but maybe look more into the sort of small-scale side. In any case, if you look at the region and even beyond, Ghana was among the countries to actually legalize small-scale mining. Until 1989, it was not allowed for a Ghanaian to do mining. I mean, if you wanted to, even though our ancient history tells us that we've worked with gold for a very long time. Why have we chosen? And in fact, if you look at the the observation, if you observe generally what obtains in the small scale side of the industry, you might see a majority of the operators operating at the blind side of the law. Why have we chosen to go out of the realms of the law and then rather want to thrive in the area of illegality as a country and as people are interested in small scale mining?
If I may come in here, I think it's all a question of policy failure. First and foremost, if you look at the law, and the lawyers will tell us there is the spirit and there is the letter of the law, and the spirit of the law views small-scale mining as a livelihood issue. Now, what we haven't done by way of policy support to the small-scale sector is to, one, make it easy and more convenient for people to formalize the activities. That is, taking the registration processes close to where the activities take place. We haven't quite done that. We also haven't provided any financial support in the form of a venture capital fund or facilitate access to credit to procure the required technology to be able to carry out the activities. And so that has been a major setback for people working in the industry, and that is the major motivating factor for Ghanaians going outside the country to look for partners to come and exploit the gold on small scale basis, even though the law frowns on the participation of foreign nationals. I don't think also we've done a good job of providing small scale operators with geological data support, which for me could be a major attraction in people wanting to formalize. If they know they formalize, this is what they get. For now, I cannot see anything that is attractive to a small scale miner to formalize his or her operations. And that is where I think the failure is. And once we address that policy gap, there's a way in which we can get many more illegal miners coming on board and formalizing the activities.
Is it also not the case that if the law says you should do this, you must do that? The law says if you want to do small-scale mining, approach this institution, get a piece of land, and then get on mining. Otherwise, you might even compare it with other big-scale operators who have to wait. Some of them have to wait, sometimes inordinately long before they get their permits to mine. Is it not the case that we are often disrespectful of the law?
No, I don't think it's as simple as that. If the law says you must do this, okay, the law must make it easy for you to comply. But you see, I don't think it's that convenient, because I've spoken to a few small-scale miners who tell me that they won't leave their activities and come to Accra chasing a piece of paper that will allow them to earn a living. And so what is it that we can do to make the formalization process very easy and less time-consuming? What is it that we can do to make it attractive by way of what support we give them? So that people know that, hey, if I do this, this is what I get. But if I don't do this, I get punished for it. So when you actually formulate a piece of law, you want to put into that law a carrot and stick kind of measures to ensure compliance. But we do the law in a way that does not make us think about how we ensure people comply with it. We make it more difficult for people to comply with laws in this country than to kind of offend them.
Yeah, but I mean, if you look at, so I'm coming back to you. If you look at between 2010 and today, you see the dynamics of small-scale mining has changed significantly. In the 80s when, and I agree with you with your definition of the spirit of the law, which anticipated livelihoods, because now people who did those work, they used simple implement. They actually measured the weight of their gold in blade, compare that to the weight of blade and all that. So really, they were just aching out a living. Now, if you look at 2010 up to date,
more sophisticated.
Dynamics have changed. It's no longer a livelihood enhancement thing. It is a wealth creation thing. It's a wealth generating thing.
Yeah.
So can we still say that because the law hasn't provided a carrot and stick, people should still, go on with that? People should still use excavators. Some of them are using explosives, whose use is very dangerous. And of course, we are also seeing the negative effect of these activities.
Yeah, Tony, you're so right. And the dynamics certainly have changed. And that is why we also, as a people, as regulators, and as interested parties, both civil society and industry, have to help to ensure that we are up to it with regulation. I think it's so critical because, you see, if you consider the use of excavators, for example, the impact on the environment and all of that. So it's about time we work together. We don't really have a choice in this. I say to myself, you look at the production from that segment, that whole segment of the business compared to what you have in the formal sector, it just hits you that it's about time we start.
But what he's saying is that if you look at the production of from the small-scale mining sector, it's actually bigger than any single mining company in this country. If the total production from small-scale mining sector is bigger than
much
any
bigger.
Single mining company
almost
in the
all
country.
of them. Almost all of them.
Yeah.
Almost
So that's a significant
so it's
contribution.
something, if we really want to look at how to optimize, and it's not just the revenue, but the total benefit in terms of employment, value addition, and all of that. We don't have a choice as a people to look at that segment of the business and see how best we can help them. One of the things we have talked about, you remember, Tony, has to do with how do we even showcase the good and compliant ones. Steve talked about the carrot and stick approach. It's not just about chasing them from their illicit activities, but even the ones who are doing it well in their own small way. How do we project them? How do we say that this is doable? Mr. A and Mr. B are Ghanaians and they are doing it well. And these are the support mechanisms from industry, from government, from civil society, helping to ensure that they get up there. So I think it's something all parties, civil society, government, and companies have to work together to recognize those who are doing well. I think that is very, very important.
Is it the case that we seem to have overly focused on the illegal side of the business, to the detriment
I think so.
of the ones who are doing it legitimately and really conforming to the law? In fact, I had the opportunity to visit a group in Bibiani, the small-scale mining group. They call themselves small-scale mining group. And I told them that you are no more a Komyeya because it's maybe a Kombeya because now you are no more hungry. Now, you know what they told me? They said they started by operating illegally. And that when they during the time of operating illegally, at the end of every month, they parceled monies to certain individuals whose names and institutions I will not be able to mention on TV. Every month, they had to see this, they had to see that, they had to see that, just for their own protection. Now, when they formalized and actually regularized themselves, they don't have to do that. Even when the police are making their normal rounds over there, they don't run away. Whereas in the past, they used to run away. Even when they saw the BNI guy around, they would run away. Now they wouldn't have to run away. And when they saw Minerals Commission's staff there, they knew they were going to give them assistance in terms of technical approaches to what they do. So I think it's very important that even with the increase in production and the use of chamfans and excavators, people should see the benefit of legalizing and regularizing.
Yeah, but that's the story that is not told.
Yes,
that's right.
Yes,
and
we need to. And
Exactly.
Tony, you know, we've had this discussion. Yes. Hopefully, by the end of this year, we'll have the first mining industry awards.
Good.
And a category we want to showcase is small-scale mining. And we have some work to do. We need to do a kind of evaluation such that whoever we're able to throw up there or pull up there, there'll be no dispute. That has gone through the mill, he's got the approval of the inspectorate division, the EPA, and everybody, even within the community in which they work, will be able to recognize and admit that this is a compliance company worth, supporting.
But I hope you involve the civil society in the selection of those who deserve awards, because people in the community level the companies, and you want to seek the opinion if you are assessing performance on the basis of which you are going to award.
Exactly. In fact, we will open up the space. With our expectation that we open up the space, it will not just be a Chamber of Mines thing. We expect the regulators to play a role. And then again, I know civil society, especially your organization, which has been in the, in the thick of things on the ground, would also be invited to make some contribution.
My producer seems to be signaling me that we're almost running out of time.
Wow.
You know, all too soon when discussions are very interesting,
so
then
exciting.
time becomes an enemy. Now, but look, you won't go until you have given me your final take on these issues. How do we ensure the integration of mining into the economy of this country? How do we get the benefit? How do we maximize the benefit of mining in this country?
I think, Tony, the first thing to recognize is that there is some integration. You talked about where we were, for example, around 1986, the year 1990, up to where we are now. And you alluded to the level of local, procurement in the industry. It has actually improved, but there's scope for us to do more. And that scope is not just for the mining industry, because then the question is, Steve alluded to it, which are the strategic products which we have to produce locally such that there will be benefits or uses in other sectors of the economy? I think that is critical. So that is the key thing we need to do together, government and companies coming together and identify these products. Again, the question of the Ministry of Trade and Industry in this, they have to be central in this whole endeavor. The question of small-scale mining, we have talked about it at length, is a question of how to ensure that they do it well. Steve alluded to the fact that there's a kind of uncertainty around the way they do their work. If you consider, an uncertainty is risk, and that's why they'll run away. That's why Shylocks will actually rip them off. But if from the get-go, there's some scientific basis for them to go to land A and not to land B, that would reduce the risk inherent in their business. And as you well know, Tony, the large-scale mines go through that phase before they even get a license to start, mining.
But look, let me just quickly say that the Minerals Commission has that.
Okay.
In fact, they have earmarked various areas where government spends money to do the investigation, to do the exploration, and make them available. In some areas, we get resistance from communities, even when we're doing the exploration for the small-scale mining. Some communities, resist, and then what you see is that Galamsey takes over. So yes, the commission is doing that at a major cost. I mean, we didn't have time to talk about taxes and all that, but really it's a good point. But the commission is already doing that. I think it's important.
It's important that once government spends money to do geological investigation for mining to take place, and for one reason or the other, the commission is not unable to parcel it out, I think the commission should work with the security agencies to ensure that government gets benefit from that endeavor. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, I think there is a certain level of mistrust, and so the way to deal with it will be to work with identifiable groups. Let them know that you are working in their favor, and I think you'll be able to get them to come along. But before we go, I would say that we need to take a look at the national mining policy. And I'm not too sure if it's been...
By the way, the national mining
finalized.
Policy has been finalized.
It's been
finalized. I used to be a critic of why we didn't have one. We now have it, and very soon you'll get a copy of it.
Right, and I'm not too sure whether it prohibits the taking of royalties in cash. If we are going to continue taking our royalties in cash rather than in raw material gold, then there's no way we'll be able to integrate the gold sector into the rest of the national economy. But I also say that one of the major reasons, and many Ghanaians have not seen the impact of mining in their lives, is also due to the behavior of mining companies, the big boys. A lot of them play the role of Father Christmases. So they go into a community, their business is to mine, but they go playing the role of a district assembly. Where there is no water, they provide water. Where there are no roads, they are providing roads and doing all that. When that happens, there's a little incentive for the district assembly to live up to its responsibility. So regardless of the fact that the district assembly is receiving extra revenue from royalties, they are not doing much with that, because the things they ought to do are being done by the mining company. That leads to abuse and misuse of that extra revenue. And I think the mining companies ought to advise themselves in this regard. Where they think there's a certain lack of capacity on the part of the assembly to deliver, they should work with the assembly to deliver. They should not work outside the assembly system in a way that undermines the mandate of that authority.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think the passage of the Minerals Development Fund bill might help. It's already in Parliament. It might address some of the issues that you are raising. But viewers, you've been watching Toni Aubynn's Take. We have discussed our extractive industries and how far we have fared. Last week, we looked at the upstream side and saw sort of how we have actually mined processes and all that. This week we have been looking at integrating the industry into the economy, focusing more on local content. We extended the local content discussions to small-scale mining, which is actually a real definition of local content. With me has been Mr. Suleimani Kone, who is the CEO of the Chamber of Mines, and then Dr. Steve Mantiao, who is the campaign coordinator of ISODEC. My name is Toni Aubynn, Dr. Toni Aubynn. I'm the CEO of the Minerals Commission. I've been your host. Bye-bye.